Hi, it's Lisa. We get a lot of questions around here about how the work-life equation is different for single parents. If you listened to our VP Moms episode, you heard Helen and Christine talk about their challenges raising children on their own. So we asked them back to talk specifically about that. Helen's got 2 girls, Christine's got 1, and here's what they had to say. You're listening to The Work-Life Equation, the Bright Horizons podcast for busy working families. Whether you're a working mom, a dad, or you're busy caring for other family members, we've got tips for how to fit jobs and families together and for how to make your work-life equation add up. What is the one thing you would like people to know about single parenthood? Like, is there something that they would be surprised at?
I would say it's not as bad as maybe people make it out to be. I think there are some great parts about being a single parent, and I think there are some really hard parts about it too. And I think when you layer work on top of it, it obviously gets more complex.
It's interesting that you say that it's not as hard as people think. I think the world has an idea of what single parenthood means. What do you think, Helen?
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody, right? And I think we'll probably keep saying this today, that, all the different things that contribute to being this particular single parent make a difference. Is the child's father or, other parent in the picture? Do you have other support in your life? Do you have family who are nearby? Do you have, good neighborhood? All of those things. Some of those are things you can control. Some of them are things you can't control. So I think you probably have to think more and be more deliberate about planning that. I think that would probably the biggest thing I had to learn is just really to think about who's in my life and who will I need to have in my life. So there's a lot more planning. I think our experiences are all very, very different, in fact.
And that makes you like parents in general. I would say that's probably true about all parenting, right. Which is interesting. Now, you talked about the people that support you. I just happened to learn a little factoid that you two live quite close to each other and are apparently quite an important support system for each other. How important is, whether it's sisterhood or whatever your support network is, how important has that been?
Really important. One of the things I was thinking about, Christine, this morning is that when you're a single parent, I think time is definitely even more critical. Like, you have very little time, definitely, and a lot of it's logistics. And so we have this, we're able to shorthand a text to each other. Can you do this tonight? Or could you do, whatever? And so having people who are like family, who you can really, really count on without having to always do the niceties, to be honest, is really critical.
That's been a big evolution for me. I think, I've been a single mom since my daughter was born. I would say the first half of my daughter's life, she's 11 now, I really focused on independence and doing everything myself. And I think somewhere along the line, I realized it's so unnecessary, and I'm not getting a badge from anyone for being a martyr. And so one of my big lessons over the last 11 years has been to be open, to ask for help, to not feel like every favor that I'm asking for needs to be fully reciprocated every time, to be super apologetic about this stuff, to offer long explanations. The longer you're a parent, the more you realize everyone has difficult moments, whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you have one child, whether you have multiple children, and we all need each other in different ways. And so reaching out to family, to friends, to your children's friends, families, it's all a really important part of parenting, no matter who you are, and probably even more important as a single parent.
You said that for the first half of your daughter's life, you felt like you had to do it all. Was there a career trajectory change that came along with that realization?
I don't know. Nothing as much of an epiphany as maybe what you're looking for. I think I kind of, you get worn down and you get tired and you start to rethink the way that you're doing things. So for me, it was gradual. And I'd say the smarter I got about managing my life as a single mom, the better I did in my job. That makes sense, right? You become more efficient with how you're doing things, so you have more time and energy and passion and excitement to bring to your work self.
I think for me also, I started to probably at the same time my children got a little older, I started to realize I did need to take care of myself, right? I needed to get to the gym, or I just needed to have some of my own time. And so, it is friends and your support network that facilitate that, and working through your guilt, or, trying to sort of manage the guilt. And once you can do all of that better, then, you're going to be able to take better care of yourself.
Yeah.
So that supports healthy career growth and just feeling a little better about being an employee and feeling like you're really rising to the occasion both at work and at home, which I think we all want.
Right.
You know, it's hard. It's always hard, but I think as my kids got older, it just became something that became more critical to me.
I mean, let's talk about guilt. Is that a thing?
It's definitely a thing. I think it's a thing for all parents, probably. I can't say that I am completely guilt-free, but I think I'm much more intentional about it. Christine's point about reciprocity, I mean, the amount of times we have a carpool network group, and we're always sort of relying on each other. And if we were always thinking, well, this person did this for me or had my child over this afternoon, it would just drive us all crazy. So I think just really being intentional about that's something I can just let go of.
That's really interesting. Like, get over that we're all helping each other. Is that like the baseline here?
Yes, and I think people are genuinely happy to help and be helpful and offer support. I know I am when I can do it. So, I think if you kind of approach it with that point of view, it gets a lot easier.
I mean, I've also learned that my children, and again, this is something most parents learn, is that, your children are different every year. So where there was guilt one year about something, whether it was sending a semi-sick child to school, not with a fever, but one where you thought, well, they'd like to stay home, but I really think they can do it. That also gets easier. You change as a parent. You know your child better. You know what makes sense.
And that's a really important point all around, because the years where you can't leave your child are a finite number of years. I mean, eventually you're setting yourself up for work success over the long haul.
Yeah, completely. And it's funny, just going back to the guilt question, I think we were talking about this earlier, but for whatever reason, I have very little guilt about being a working single mom. And I don't know if that's just because for me, there really hasn't been an option. Like, I haven't had it one way and then another, and maybe so it's just been a fairly uniform experience that I've never really thought about the options. But I feel good about being a working mom, actually. I feel really good about role modeling I'm doing for my daughter. We were driving in the car somewhere the other day, and she said something about how proud she was of me and the work that I do, which was really funny because she has no idea what I do. But I think just the fact that she sees me as independent, self-sufficient, like, those are signals that she's getting, whether she understands what I do during the day or not.
You must feel a great sense of pride. You alluded to that earlier.
Yeah, I do, actually. I mean, I think it's not easy, but I think, when I look back on making it through the tough times, it helps that my daughter is fairly well-adjusted and happy and thriving in school. So, again, there's lots of considerations to be made, back to Helen's point of, like, every situation is different. But I feel good about the balance that I have.
I don't want to mine into the muck, but I find that people are they really like to know the challenges, the specific, like, has there been a moment at work where you really had to be creative or things did not go the way you wanted them to and you really had to tap dance in order to make things work, either at home or at work? For me, people used to ask me about, say, for example, having a great Thanksgiving dinner, and I've never done that. I've always burnt something, and people find that amusing and comforting. So I'm looking for the same sort of thing from you. Like, there are single parents out there that are having a moment. How can you make them feel better about their moment?
I mean, the moments happen all the time. And I think, again, it's specific to every child. But I remember a time when my daughter was, 4 or 5, and the owner of my company, my previous employer, was coming into town, and there were all these last-minute meetings being made, and I had to be in to work like by 7:30 a.m. and there was a dinner after work, and so I was scrambling with everyone I knew to try to figure out coverage, and I was reviewing with my daughter what the plan was for the day, and it was, I was saying, okay, you're going to go to Mike and Molly's for breakfast. Mike and Molly are going to walk you to Jenna's to catch the bus. Jenna's going to take you to the bus. You're going to go to school. Sarah's going to pick you up from the bus after school. You're going to go to Denise's after school, and then you're going to come back and go to Sarah's for dinner. You got that? And she was like, what's so complicated about that? Because she didn't really, for me, it had been like a Herculean effort. But, I think for her, as long as there was structure and she understood what to expect, it wasn't a big deal. And that, that was a day where I may have said I never had guilt, but that was a day where, on my long commute to work, I was like, whoa, is this really what I should be doing? But it all worked out fine.
I think there's a lot more anxiety potentially with being a single mom, especially when they're younger, right? Especially when you can't leave them alone. on their own. Again, my kids are
course.
now 10 and 12, so, we're moving into a slightly different phase of their lives. But, when they're younger and there's just you and they call out sick and you have an important meeting to go to and you don't have family, neither Christine and I have family or right there. When I think about guilt, I think one of the reasons I had to sort of squash that guilt was because the level of anxiety is already relatively high. And so you have to deal with that because you probably are the primary breadwinner, right? So you need to keep your job. I mean, the amount of times I said to my kids, they'd say, why do you have to do this? It's because I have to keep my job. I have to not lose my job so that I don't lose the house, and probably shouldn't. This is probably not the right thing to say to children, but
I said we're role models. We're just telling you.
But that anxiety that I was feeling, I guess, okay, let me turn this around. So I didn't want to be conveying that anxiety to them. And so I had to, again, manage my own anxiety around all of those things. And so, I think that's a reality. I remember a single mom telling me when she had little ones about shoveling the snow and literally opening it so that she could, see the glass door, and she had her kids, little kids, right against the door while she was outside for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I mean, when you have little kids, we all know you can't really leave them alone for very long. So
I forgot about shoveling the snow. That is a logistical.
This
tough one.
I hadn't even thought of that, but
it never ends. But the resourcefulness that we develop and we develop in our children, and that they probably develop earlier than many other children.
So we like to tell ourselves.
No. I mean, we have in the room with us our esteemed producer, LaDonna, who is the successful daughter of a single mom. So we have living proof right here.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to say, it's interesting to hear when your children are younger, sort of managing the anxiety, and you're a really great example of you're going through the checklist and you're worried and your daughter's like, that's fine.
Yeah.
I have friends who are single parents. My sister is a single mom and have, those similar types of scenarios, but it does feel like on the flip side of things. And then of course, when your children get older and maybe you have these sorts of reflective conversations, I feel like you will find that everything was actually fine.
Yeah.
Everything was fine. The kids will be fine.
Yeah, and I think we tend, I don't want to say as women, but I think we tend to beat ourselves up a lot for, not handling things perfectly or having the ability to retrospect and think about what we might have done differently. But that's not always that helpful.
I mean, I like the idea of flipping the anxiety or potential worry into just resourcefulness. And, maybe you don't really have a choice in that matter. It's just what you need to do, but I think that's a helpful tip, right? For anyone maybe feeling like they're not sure how they're managing their careers and stuff at home, especially if they're maybe a little earlier in their careers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I separated from my ex and I ended up somewhat rashly now, in retrospect, buying a house, having never done that before, and there were a ton of things I didn't know about, but also there were a ton of things that I had left to my ex previously that actually weren't that hard, like putting up a shelf. Mm-hmm. And so, because of the necessity of the situation and having two young kids running around and not having time to contemplate it, I pulled up YouTube and worked out how to do it fast and then just did it. So any situation that puts you under pressure, as long as it's not sustained and as long as, again, you can manage the anxiety, you learn more in. I think I took the best out of that situation. Now I'm very handy.
Well, I think household maintenance is another big one.
Yeah,
especially if you're not quite at the point where you have a ton of disposable income, figuring out how to do all that stuff on your own. YouTube is a lifesaver.
So let's assume that there are some single parents who are just at the beginning. What are they thinking at this point, and how can you comfort them?
I mean, what Helen was talking about, I just need to keep my job, was pretty much how I felt too. The degree of aspiration was pretty low. Just don't get fired. But then I think as you develop your routine and you kind of gain more comfort, you can start to be more ambitious.
You're going to want to work for a family-friendly company if you possibly can, which of course not everybody has the luxury of. But I made the choice of sharing with my manager the circumstances I was going through. But it's a dance, right? I mean, at the end of the day, a manager wants you to be able to do your job.
But, being candid with your manager, I wonder, what's the flip side of that? You both have said that women in general are pretty hard on themselves. Have either of you ever checked in early in this experience to say to a manager, how am I doing? And found out that you were doing better than you thought?
I would say that almost every one-on-one, not so much anymore, but early on when my daughter was younger, my schedule was abbreviated in the office, and I would come in when I came in and I would leave when I left, but I would get the work done. And so I'd say almost every one-on-one I would check in on and say, like, do you feel like everything's okay? Is my schedule still working for you? Do you feel like you have what you need? And just be very open and direct about that conversation. And it's interesting, depending on the company that you work for. My last company where I worked when my daughter was younger, I actually prioritized sometimes social events over in-person time in the office. So I would get the work done, but I would always make it a priority to attend the dinners, attend the, after work gatherings, because I felt like that was a place where I could really connect with people and build relationships and make my presence known, and I think people appreciated that.
That's really impressive, because a lot of us really dial back that. That's a great piece of advice.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely doesn't work for everyone, but, I might have made the choice on a given day where there was something going on at night where I would work from home during the day and I would make it into work at night.
I think that's a great piece of advice, because from a networking standpoint, I think that's great. How about you? Did you find, just being candid and saying, how am I doing, were you pleasantly surprised?
Yeah, I've never had a negative reaction to it, but I think I personally have a value around sort of probably the British thing, keep calm and carry on. So there's only so much I want to share of the chaos, but that's, my personal choice. I did have an employee probably about a year after I separated from my ex and moved in, and it was just, again, a lot going on, but I didn't want to, especially with my employees, I didn't want to burden them with that, because again, they have their own stuff. But I had an employee about a year later saying, I'm just so personally in admiration of you for how you've done all of this and that you've had all of that going on. So that was nice affirmation. It's interesting what people see.
And the flip side of it is, like, I've heard people say this, is that if you try to shoulder too much without people understanding what your stuff is, sometimes it can work against you. And I've heard people say that they should have actually stepped back for a minute and told people why, instead of just trying to pretend everything was exactly the way it was before.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think a huge piece of leadership is vulnerability and humility and openness. And I think, obviously you don't want to share your entire life, but I think giving people a glimpse into the good days and the bad days and being human, just like everyone is, it's important to model.
And we've touched on this, and again, everybody's circumstances are different, but there were some upsides for me of being a single mom. So when you talked about those people who are just sort of entering it, I mean, first of all, it was just like authentically being me and coming home every night to a place that felt mine and comfortable. But, again, both in Christine and my circumstances, our kids' fathers are involved. And so I get 2 or 3 nights off of mine a week. And, again, different for everybody. But that, in terms of my career, was an advantage. So, I choose to work longer in the office if I don't need to go home and cook dinner for anybody. So that's, again, just how I chose to play it. So there's definitely some interesting upsides.
Well, it sounds like for the employer, too.
Yeah.
Could be.
You're working extra hours.
I actually like hearing about the upside.
Yeah, I do too.
So we have this group of couple moms, and we sit around there's about the 6 of us, and Christine and I are both single moms. And there was one evening when there was a lot of kind of single mom envy going on. Like, you ladies, you get to, have your nights off. And
I don't mean to make it sound
glamorous.
It's not. But I think there are some upsides. If you are an independent person, I think it works really well in that way. I think you can make the decisions that make sense for you and your household without a lot of back and forth with other people.
No negotiation.
Yeah, exactly. If I want to leave the dishes in the sink on a Tuesday night, I'm going to do it. I have every other weekend off, so it's not a regular time every week, but it is nice to have a little bit of quiet time, And I think also there's a huge sense of accomplishment and pride when you kind of get into a rhythm or routine when things are clicking and you've made it through the hard parts. I think you learn a lot of stuff, and I think you grow your self-confidence, and I think there's a lot of character building that's done when you make it through the other side of those hard times.
I believe it, because neither of you have to question whether you can do it alone. You've done it. There's no proof required.
You know, I am so grateful for the fact that I had some financial independence and that was really able to make the move, you know, without it creating huge financial hardship. I mean, there definitely was initially some struggle. We have 3 daughters that we're representing here, and I think all of them are learning that about financial independence and taking care of your career. It's not a message that I'm constantly telling them about, but I think they see that, what financial independence gives them, or gives me, in terms of confidence and the ability to make my own decisions. And I think that that's a really important message for all girls, actually.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I was in this funny conversation with my daughter a couple weeks ago, and she was listing off the things that she wants to be when she grows up. Like, she wants to be a baker and an architect and whatever. And I said, I wonder if you'll marry someone that does something like that. And she was like, oh no, the person that I marry is going to stay home and clean the house. And I was like, oh, why is that? And she's like, because I don't want to do that. You know, it's so funny because it's kind of the opposite of the paradigm that, like, I think society teaches young kids, you know.
And it's still out there.
Yeah.
It is. One of the other things that I hear from both of you that I think is really interesting and informative, and I think would be really good for people to hear, is that when you talk about the free time that you have, that you use it to take care of you.
Definitely. I mean, so I'm an introvert. I absolutely need that time to kind of like decompress and come back together and read and listen to music and cook. And there's a good chunk of my me time that is spent literally with just me. And that's because that's what works best for me. When my daughter was younger, I think every weekend that I didn't have my daughter, I was trying to like get everything done in my life. Is the garden tended? Did I cut the grass? Did I reorganize the shed? How does all this stuff get done? And then I think at some point I realized that none of that stuff really matters that much. and if it matters that much and I don't want to do it, there are plenty of people to help you do that kind of stuff. So I think that's another lesson that I've learned over the years is you don't have to do everything yourself, and you also don't have to do everything.
But one of the things I'd say I'm more careful about is who is in my life. I have a lot of people in my life who are, you know, part of the network, and there may not be people who I'm going to have close friendships with, and that I've also come to find is perfectly fine. But those people that I spend time with, and I'm much more cautious about who those people are, and I'm very aware if it's someone who doesn't feel like they feed me, because we all have so many things that are taking from us, whether it's work or our children, and, you know, again, they feed us too, but you know what I'm saying.
No, of course, I get it.
And so in my free time, it's just got to be fun and different, and
and it doesn't have to be used for purpose.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. No, I think that's so important for people here because women forget that all the time.
Yep.
I'm struck by how you two have succeeded professionally and personally, and bravo to both of you. So you are role models for people. What is one thing you think would be a valuable takeaway?
I think it gets easier. I know it gets easier. It gets easier as the children get older, as you navigate it, as you learn some handy woman skills. All of that is true, that it changes every year, so don't get too stuck on something that's not working. So one of the things I think about, and it may be because I'm in HR, is respecting the organization. Even if you have a family-friendly organization, you know, you have a responsibility at a senior level. So I am so grateful to the organization for providing flexibility. I think there's such a theme here. It's not about, like, it doesn't have to be an immediate reciprocity, but I also need to respect and be grateful for the fact the organization's giving me this flexibility and give back. Maybe in different ways. It doesn't have to be, again, the 9 to 5. It could be that I might put in some time at the weekend, or I might do something else, or I might go to the evening events, like Christine says. So I think I don't want to come with a sense of entitlement as a single mom and think the organization owes me this because I have these difficult circumstances.
And there is one other thing that I thought of before I get to your one thing, which is, you know, the dance of parenthood and work. Have you found that you've had to deprioritize one over the other so that it's kind of, you know, so at some point your career, while it's something you always pursued, maybe you weren't pursuing that next title for a moment in time while you were at a difficult moment in parenting?
No, I mean, and it's a great question, and I don't feel like I have. I mean, I think it's a daily choice. But I don't think I would say, 3 months, my daughter's not important, because as a single mom, you can't say to the other partner, right, you've got this on the parent front for like 3 months because I'm like on this big assignment. On a daily basis, you're always on, you're always in, and that's so important to me. Like, I wouldn't want to miss a moment of that.
Right.
But I haven't had to do that in my career either, I don't think.
Yeah. This is going to sound awful, but I always have felt like, although my daughter is the most important thing in the world to me, work is usually the priority on a daily basis, because my job and having flexibility in my job is what allows me to be the mom that I want to be. So it's the thing that lets me be a room parent and leave every Tuesday at 3. It's the thing that allows me to be a Girl Scout troop leader. Like, having the trust of the organization that I work for and the belief of the people that I work for is what allows me to be the best mom I can be. So I have to put that almost first so that I can be the mom I want to be.
I feel like that might be your one thing.
Yeah, it could be. Well, my other one thing, so now if Helen's got 2 one things I get, is that sometimes good is good enough. Do not seek perfection in every arena of your life, because you will be miserable. And just sometimes be happy with feeling like you did a decent job.
Christine and Helen say they're proud of the job they've done, both at home and at work. For those of you at the starting line or anywhere in the middle, we hope that's encouraging news. If you like what you heard today, get more of our podcast by subscribing. While you're downloading, let us know what you thought, or give us a share. Thanks to everyone for being here. We look forward to seeing you next time as we help make the work-life equation add up.